Hello, a very good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News this Monday morning on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Let's begin as always with this morning's headlines. Prime Minister calls meeting of NDA constituents on the eve of monsoon session. Alliance to firm up strategy against a united opposition onslaught in Parliament. Rains trigger landslides and cause floods in Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Uttarakhand. 3 people died due to landslides on the Mumbai-Pune expressway. US Defense Secretary arrives in Israel to ease fears over Iran nuclear deal. Ashton Carter to meet Benjamin Netanyahu. Increased US military support likely. Greek banks to reopen today after 3 weeks of closure. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says debt concessions could be considered. And Australia trounced England in the second Ashes Test to level the series at 1 apiece. Aussies win by 405 runs with a day to spare. Our top focus on the bulletin this morning. The Prime Minister has called a meeting of all NDA constituents today, a day ahead of the monsoon session of Parliament. The meeting is crucial considering that the opposition is closing the ranks over several issues to target the centre during this session. Here's a report.
Bracing for an opposition onslaught on Lalit Modi controversy, Vyapam scam and other issues, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called a maiden meet of all NDA constituents on the eve of the monsoon session of Parliament today to work out a strategy to counter the opposition.
अब हम यहाँ मस्ती से बैठे हैं, लेकिन परसों देखना आप कैसा मुकाबला होता है.
The meeting assumes significance as the main opposition Congress and Left have stacked up ammunition on several issues including the Vyapam scam and the Lalit Modi row involving a host of senior BJP leaders to target the government.
पार्लियामेंट का चलना न चलना विपक्ष के हाथ में नहीं. यदि भारतीय जनता पार्टी इन 1-2 दिन में उन पर एक्शन लेती है तो मेरे ख्याल में पार्लियामेंट का चलना और आसान होगा, बिल पास करने और आसान होंगे.
The seriousness with which the government is taking the opposition dare can be gauged by the fact that this is the first time that Modi has called a meeting of the ruling alliance since he stormed to power in May 2014. While the BJP-led NDA commands a sizable majority in the Lok Sabha, it lacks numbers in the upper house, where the opposition Congress is the largest party and holds the key to passage of key legislations, including the GST and land bill. With no consensus on the land bill, the government is likely to promulgate the ordinance for an unprecedented 4th time.
किसानों की बात आई, हम ऑर्डिनेंस पास करेंगे भैया. 3 बार ऑर्डिनेंस पास कर दिया. दम नहीं है, पार्लियामेंट में पास नहीं होने देंगे हम, देख लेना. 1 इंच जमीन नहीं जाएगी.
Meanwhile, in a party meeting on Sunday, the BJP has decided to take an aggressive stance against opposition attack. All party meetings by Parliamentary Affairs Minister M. Venkaiah Naidu and Speaker Sumitra Mahajan have also been convened today to help the smooth conduct of Parliament. Government has finalized 35 items of business for the monsoon session that begins on Tuesday. This includes 9 bills pending in the Rajya Sabha and 4 pending in the Lok Sabha, besides introduction of 11 new bills. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this morning to talk about this is Mahua Chatterjee, Assistant Political Editor of the Times of India. Mahua, good morning. Thank you for joining me on the program. Well, as far as the BJP is concerned, certainly it seems to be in a spot of bother ahead of the monsoon session of Parliament. The Prime Minister has not done it before, but he has called for all the NDA constituents to meet on the eve of the monsoon session of Parliament.
Yes, this is the first time, you see, that the NDA parties have been called for a meeting before the session. I remember the last few times the allies have been complaining that, forget about the opposition parties. Since we are supposed to be part of the government, we are not being called and included in the planning for the strategy to brace with the opposition in Parliament. So even in the last session, we did see the budget session. We did see quite a bit of opposition noise, and what happened in between. I mean, whether it is the Lalit Gate issue or the Vyapam, or trouble in various states, including something coming up in Maharashtra, something coming up in Chhattisgarh, something coming. So these things have obviously, and targets have been ministers at the highest level, chief ministers. So there is enough ammunition for the opposition to fire.
Is this the most opportune moment for the opposition then?
It is. I mean, most in the sense, so far, yes. Because the government has not faltered before this, or not been caught on the back foot before this as much as it was this time. But the smart move on the Modi government's behalf and the BJP party's behalf is that they are, or instead of going about it in a haphazard manner, they have, sort of got into it in a proper act. They have created a system within the party which is coordinating already with the states, with all the states where the BJP has its own government. Therefore, whatever, there will be very little loose ends, actually, or, issues that will come up which they will probably not be able to defend or counter.
So far, it seems like all the members of the BJP, all the senior leaders seem to be on the same page. Is that why this meeting is being called for, so that they can get the other allies too on board and they can all speak in one voice?
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is what I'm saying is that first they've gone and coordinated their issues with the states. And now, before the session, they first got their top leaders to meet yesterday. They met with Amit Shah, and where the chief ministers, of course, Shivraj Singh Chauhan couldn't come because of, he'll be meeting Amit Shah today. But Vasundhara came and met and went off. And all the big leaders, Arun Jaitley, Sushma Swaraj, even Rajnath Singh, and Nirmala Sitharaman, and all these people who will have to now face the opposition in Parliament and will be talking on behalf of the government and the party, will have been taken, have been briefed. All clarifications have been made so that they can properly put up the case for the government and the party. And that is the part 2 of that is the NDA meeting today, where the idea is to take the allies on board. That is a far more difficult task, though, because allies like Shiv Sena have been
constantly
making
cribbing.
Their noises.
Yes, they've been making their noises. But there's another meeting apart from this meeting that is scheduled for today. That, of course, is the NDA meet with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has called for the meeting of the BJP Parliamentary Party Executive as the government and the ruling party firm up their strategy for the monsoon session. Now, the session is set to be a stormy one over the opposition demand for the resignation of many party leaders. BJP has made it clear that it will not be on the defensive and instead target top Congress leaders over issues like the Lalit Modi controversy. Mahua, coming back to you now, of course, after the NDA meeting, the Prime Minister will meet the key constituents of the BJP itself. And the strategy thus far seems to be, offence is the best form of defence. Is that what you're going to see in Parliament as well?
Yeah, absolutely. They're trying. That's the best bet for the government, and that's what they're preparing for, gearing up for. The trouble is, but with that offensive and the offensive coming from the opposition end, the bills will suffer because that cannot be done in a confrontational atmosphere. I mean, many of them are constitutional amendment bills for which you need 2/3 majority in the House. You cannot. You are not supposed to pass them in a din. I mean, it's not that easy to pass the bill. So that is where you will have to wait and see whether the government will be able to manage the opposition in passing some of the bills at least. Even I mean, the land bill and, the big ones are I think it's out of the question in this
They
session.
are in a limbo, you're saying?
They'll have to wait till the next session. Also,
Do you expect any work being done in this monsoon session of Parliament, or is it going to be a washout?
End of the day, in Lok Sabha, BJP does have its numbers. I mean, if it can get its act together, I mean, business means two things, bills and issues. Some issues may go through, but bills, I really doubt, unless they can, on certain bills, they can take the opposition on board. But that seems extremely unlikely in this session, yes.
All right, on that note, we'll...
and it's a very short session, you see.
Yes,
so
very
there's
short,
very
3 weeks,
time
yes.
to recover
Indeed.
from
the jokes.
first bout of...
Yes, so we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Mahua, for joining us on the program this morning and putting things into perspective for us. Moving on now, many cities in Madhya Pradesh have been inundated by flood waters after days of heavy rainfall. In Ujjain city, rainwater entered many houses, shops and other buildings, throwing life completely out of gear. People were stranded in their houses. Transportation was disrupted due to damaged roads, bridges and railway tracks. Trains were running behind schedule due to water on the tracks. River Shipra flowed above the danger mark and has submerged many temples on the banks. Rains have also damaged electric wires, cutting power supply in several parts of the city. Meanwhile, in Uttarakhand, taking the Char Dham Yatra have been stranded due to landslides triggered by incessant rainfall. Heavy rains have lashed the state over the past few days, triggering landslides. In Maharashtra, 3 people were killed and another injured after a landslide hit the Mumbai-Pune expressway. The expressway was closed for traffic after the landslide occurred near Adoshi Tunnel, close to Lonavala city.
यहाँ पर लगातार मूसलाधार बारिश हो रही है। रेलवे ट्रैक पर पानी भर गया, 1 दर्जन से अधिक गाड़ियां बंद हो चुकी हैं। कई गाड़ियां आउटर पर रुकी हुई है तो कई स्टेशन पर फंसी हुई है और शिप्रा नदी में भी काफ़ी पानी आ चुका है, जिसकी वजह से शिप्रा नदी के जितने भी मंदिर है वो सब जलमग्न हो चुके हैं। जो ब्रिज है शिप्रा नदी के बड़ा पुल और छोटा पुल, उसके ऊपर से भी पानी गुजर रहा है, इसलिए आवाजाही पूरी तरीके से बंद हो चुकी है।
ये भारी बरसात चल रही है पहाड़ों में, तो इस वजह से यहाँ पर भी काफ़ी टिपिकल रहता है। तो ये स्लाइडिंग जोन है, इस वजह से यहाँ पे कल शाम को टूट गया था। उसके बाद यहाँ पे गाड़ियों की कुछ कतारें लग गई थी, स्वाभाविक है। तो हमारे द्वारा इन गाड़ी जो पीछे भी जो गाड़ियाँ आ रही थी उन्हें श्रीनगर में रोका गया है। और सुरक्षा के दृष्टिकोण चूँकि श्रीनगर थोड़ा सा कहीं ना कहीं सुरक्षित है और जो यात्रीगण आते हैं 4 धाम से, तो उनके लिए ठहरने और खाने की व्यवस्थाएं भी अच्छी है। इस वजह से इन लोगों को हमने श्रीनगर में ही रोका है।
बिल्कुल, उनको यहाँ के प्रांत जो है उनको मैंने आदेश दिए है कि उनको तत्काल मदद होनी चाहिए। तो तत्काल 4 लाख रुपया जिनकी डेथ हुई है उनको मिलेंगे और जो इंजर्ड है उनको उनकी ट्रीटमेंट हो रही है, उनको भी सरकार की तरफ से मदद मिलेगी।
Here's a look now at what's expected through the course of the day in our segment, The Day Ahead. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the 46th session of the Indian Labour Conference today and is likely to announce some big-size labour welfare schemes in his first address. Prime Minister Modi is likely to announce health benefits for unorganised construction workers, launch a job portal and address some issues considered important by the trade unions such as minimum wages and social security benefits for the unorganised sector. The Select Committee of the Rajya Sabha on GST will meet today to discuss the report which is expected to be adopted for presentation in the Parliament. The GST bill has been passed by Lok Sabha and was referred to the Select Committee by the Rajya Sabha, where the ruling NDA government does not enjoy majority. The government aims to roll out GST from April 1st next year. Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal is expected to meet the Delhi Police Commissioner B.S. Bassi today to discuss law and order situation in the national capital in the wake of the gruesome murder of a 19-year-old girl in central Delhi. Kejriwal had announced a compensation of 5 lakh rupees to the family of a girl who was stabbed to death in Anand Parbat locality and ordered a magisterial probe into the case while slamming the Delhi police for the deteriorating law and order situation. Well, it's time for a short break now, but on the other side, Greek banks to reopen today after 3 weeks of closure. That and other international news on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter is in Israel to allay the country's and Arab nations' fears on the recently signed Iran nuclear deal. Ahead of his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Carter said that he is not aiming to change anybody's mind in Israel, but rather emphasized that the accord imposes no limits on what Washington can do to ensure the security of Israel and U.S. Arab allies. Last Wednesday, world powers reached an agreement with Iran on limiting Iranian nuclear activity in return for the lifting of sanctions. However, the Israeli leadership has rejected US's idea that world powers could not have reached a better agreement with Iran over its nuclear program. The country has also hinted that it could ask for increased US military aid as a counterweight to the accord. After Israel, Carter would travel to Saudi Arabia, Iran's main regional rival.
יביאו לשינוי במדיניותה. הוא קיבל בסוף השבוע תשובה מוחצת בנאומו התוקפני והמתריס של שליט איראן חמינאי. האיראנים לא מתאמצים אפילו להסתיר את העובדה.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that she was prepared to consider further debt concessions to Greece once its latest economic reforms are worked out. In an interview to ARD-TV, Merkel said that she was open to discussing reduced interest rates and extended maturity dates. However, she emphasized that the changes could happen only after details of the latest bailout had been agreed. Merkel, however, has reiterated that there would be no debt write-off. The remarks come even as Greek banks are ready to open their branches across the country today after a 3-week shutdown. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is trying to turn a corner after he reluctantly agreed to negotiate a third bailout deal. Germany, which is the largest contributor to Greek rescue funds, has taken a tough line on Greece. However, both Greece and the IMF have been arguing for a restructuring of its €320 billion debt, saying its current position was unsustainable. In some more international news now, construction firm Mitsubishi Materials Corporation became the first major Japanese company to apologize for using captured American soldiers as slave labor during World War II, offering remorse for what they called the tragic events in our past. A representative for the company offered the apology on behalf of his predecessor, Mitsubishi Mining Company, which ran 4 sites that at the time of liberation held some 876 American prisoners of war. 27 Americans died in the camps. In all, about 12,000 American prisoners of war were put into forced labor by the Japanese government and private companies seeking to fill a wartime labor shortage, of whom more than 1,100 died. While previous Japanese prime ministers have apologized for Japan's aggression during World War II, private corporations have been less contrite.
本日この面談の機会をいただき、ジェームス・マーフィーさんほか当時の三菱工業の鉱山で労働を強いられていたすべてのアメリカ人元戦争捕虜の方々およびご家族。
For 70 years since the war ended, the prisoners of war who worked for these Japanese companies have asked for something very simple. They asked for an apology for having to perform forced labor.
Well, one of the last vestiges of the Cold War would vanish today as the red, white and blue Cuban flag will be raised over what is to once again become the Cuban embassy in Washington, ending more than 50 years of animosity between the US and Cuba. This will be the first time in 54 years the two countries will have embassies on each other's soil. While the Cuban flag will be raised over its mission in Washington, no American flag will fly at the U.S. Embassy in Havana until U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visits the country to preside over a ceremony. Kerry is due to hold talks with his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez in Washington today. The hugely symbolic step marks the thaw between the countries initiated by U.S. President Barack Obama and Cuba's President Raul Castro in December last year. With the restoration of diplomatic ties and the opening of embassies in their respective capitals, the two erstwhile foes are ready to put the decades of acrimony and division behind them and focus on the many links between the two cultures.
Pienso que es un paso decisivo en la normalización de las relaciones. O sea, lo celebramos como cubanos, estamos a la expectativa, estamos pendientes de lo que pueda ocurrir y además de lo que pueda continuar a partir de ahí, que es con optimismo, esperamos que sean cosas factibles para...
Es algo histórico por lo que a los cubanos les va a convenir, tanto a Estados Unidos como a Cuba también, y van a tener las relaciones más juntas ahora para que ellos estén mejores.
Here's a roundup of the other international news in our Globe Watch. At least 57 people have been killed and 120 injured in shelling by Houthi rebels in Yemen's southern city of Aden. Sunday's bombardment came amid attempts by government forces to tighten their grip on the city. Aden has seen months of heavy fighting between rebels and loyalists. Pro-government forces backed by airstrikes from a Saudi-led coalition last week recaptured most of the port city, including the airport. This led the exiled government of President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi to declare the area liberated. Ukraine's military and pro-Russian separatists have accused each other of shelling central areas of the main rebel stronghold of Donetsk. The shelling was the first such attack since a deal to put an end to the fighting in the civil war was signed in Minsk in February. Rebels blamed the Ukrainian military, saying that the attacks had killed a civilian, destroyed buildings and started a string of fires. Ukraine said that the separatists themselves opened fire on the city. International observers on the ground voiced concern over a serious increase in tension in Donetsk. 2 people were wounded as explosions destroyed 6 cars belonging to members of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad militant groups in Gaza City on Sunday. 5 explosions hit the Sheikh Ridwan neighborhood, a district dominated by supporters of Hamas, and disrupted celebrations for the Muslim Eid-ul-Fitr holiday. No one claimed responsibility, but Hamas, which dominates the coastal enclave, has in recent months faced violent challenges from Palestinians sympathetic to Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. Moving on to some sports news now. Australia thrashed England by 405 runs to win the second Ashes Test match at Lord's. With the win, the Aussies also levelled the 5-match Test series 1 apiece. Here's a match report.
It was a rampant Australian pace attack that ripped out England in the second test match of the Ashes series at the Lord's. Aussies recorded a stunning 405-run win as England were dismissed for the paltry total of 103 while chasing an unlikely target of 509. Winning captain Michael Clarke would have not anticipated that England would collapse to 64 for 5 at tea on the 4th day of the second Ashes Test.
You know, I sense that hunger from the senior players in particular, and they lead that. And the young players, you know, they got that enthusiasm and hunger anyway because they want to get out there and play. But I sense that hunger for success from the senior players, and we're going to need that if we want to continue to have success in this series.
England's top order, Adam Leith with only 7 runs, Alistair Cook with 11 and Gary Ballance with 14 edged catches to wicketkeeper Peter Neville to put the host in deep trouble at 42 for 3.
Certainly over the last 3 or 4 months we found ourselves too often 30 for 4, 40 for 3. That's not ideal in any circumstance, in any team. Knowing that big runs at the top order. You saw what happened, how Australia did it in this game. How it sets up a game for you. So
this was the second time in the Ashes series the team had won with more than a day to spare. The third test of the Ashes series will be played in Birmingham's Edgbaston ground starting 29th of July. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, the IPL Governing Council formed a subcommittee to delve deep into the judgment issued on the 2 IPL teams by the Justice Lodha Committee. The committee is to submit its report in the next 6 weeks. With the CSK and Rajasthan Royals suspended from the format for 2 years, the board now needs to decide on the changes required to the next edition of the IPL. Here's more.
The fate of the 2 suspended IPL teams hangs in balance as the troubled IPL Governing Council met in Mumbai. The body discussed repercussions of the punishment handed down by the Justice Lodha Committee to the Chennai Super Kings and Rajasthan Royals. The IPL Governing Council, headed by Rajiv Shukla, will also chart a future course of action for the T20 event. Shukla assured that the judgment issued by the Lodha Committee will be implemented to the book.
Within 6 months, it will be submitting its report. We have decided to implement the Lodha Committee report in toto, in letter and spirit. Whatever they have recommended, we are going to implement it, and we respect the verdict, and accordingly we are going to act.
The council has decided to form a 5-member subcommittee to study the Lodha panel's verdict and submit its report within 6 weeks' time. There's a massive tug-of-war raging among the members of the governing body. One lobby strongly feels the team's contracts need to be terminated with immediate effect, but others feel the 2-year suspension is punishment enough and terminating their contracts will harm the brand IPL. Both teams have made an 8-year investment in the tournament.
A subgroup is being constituted which will recommend what all is to be done.
Shukla promised that the verdict and the future decisions by the council will have little effect on the tournament as such, and the next edition will be bigger and better.
In future, and we can say that everybody is of the opinion that show must go on. The value of league should be enhanced. So IPL 9, I am still saying and reiterating, is going to be better than the previous editions.
The Supreme Court appointed Justice Lodha Disciplinary Committee has left the issue of termination of contracts of the IPL franchisees with the BCCI. One of the options available for the IPL is to run the 2 suspended teams with BCCI control. However, issues of conflict of interest could crop up again. The council has to negotiate a very tricky path full of legal hurdles. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, here's a roundup of the other sports news, overnight sports news in our sports beat. FIFA's leadership is meeting today to decide the date of a vote to replace President Sepp Blatter as a corruption storm inflicts ever-worsening damage on world football. The meeting takes place just 2 days after Jeffrey Webb, until May a FIFA vice president, made his first appearance in a New York court to deny charges of taking bribe. World number 3 Andy Murray was reduced to tears after he defeated France's Gilles Simon and put Great Britain into their first Davis Cup semi-final in the last 34 years. Murray beat France's Gilles Simon 4-6, 7-6, 6-3, 6-0. Meanwhile, in another match, aging tour warrior Leighton Hewitt ushered Australia into the Davis Cup semi-finals after defeating Alexander Nedyashov 7-6, 6-2, 6-3 in the decisive singles rubber against Kazakhstan. Josep Maria Bartomeu was confirmed as Barcelona's president. Bartomeu received 55% of the votes, with 25,823 members backing him, while former incumbent Joan Laporta, president of the Catalan club from 2003 to 2010, took 33% of the vote. Bartomeu will now preside over Barcelona's championships for the next 6 years. That's it on this edition of the Breakfast News. Have a nice day.